I now have a perfectly ironed pocket. It is double-sided. The method that I'm going to show you right now for creating the trim works very well when you have fabric that is kind of wild and will look cool as it peeks through. I'm going to be using extra wide double fold bias tape, and there is always a section of the tape that has been sewn together, and you want to make sure that you avoid that. So I'm going to lay it on here and make sure that none of the part that has a line that shows through it is showing, and then I will begin sewing. I'm going to make sure that my thread matches the bias tape that I have picked. So I'm going to lay the bias tape up here at the very top, and I'm going to fold it as I go, making sure that I'm keeping it right on the edge of that pocket. So I'm going to be sewing very close to the edge of this bias tape. Okay, and I will begin going backwards and forwards. And this is a very visible part of your work, so it is very important that you sew as close to the edge as you can so that it looks nice. As you go around the corners, it's going to want to come out. So every couple inches, stop and make sure, I like to call it sandwiching. Make sure that your fabric is perfectly sandwiched in this double fold bias tape. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to sandwich another little section. And I'm going to just use pressure to hold it together. The tighter the curve, the more frequently you need to sandwich, because it's going to want to just, I have had this happen all the time where students are sewing and they're sewing on the bias tape, but they're no longer sewing on the pocket. I'm going to go backwards and forwards. Now, you will remember, I'm just going to cut the threads. You will remember that at the top of our pocket, it's open. It's like a bag, okay? When we go to put this on the body, we're going to fold over that top. But this is a finished edge. If you cut your bias tape right here where the pocket ends, it's going to look horrible. So you have to cut it a little bit longer, I say an inch longer, so that when you sew this pocket onto the body, you can flip that little edge under, just like that, okay? Now the other thing is that even though this is packaged and it's folded in half, it's not a perfect fold. So sometimes by going just on the edge here, you've actually missed a part on the back. And in this case, I didn't miss anything on the back. But you always want to flip it over and make sure that you didn't miss anything on the back. And if you did, sew over those sections or you're going to have this flipping up. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Starting, I can start at the bottom if I want, just because it's easier to have my fabric fed, the large part of my fabric out here and the small part over here. Now remembering on this section, I can't just start it right at the edge. I have to give myself about an inch. And also going down, making sure that I'm not going to end up with the section that has that sewn on line. One difficulty about doing this is that I'm starting out on a deeper curve, so it makes it a little bit harder to start out on this side of the pocket than it is to start out from the top as you're going down that long, somewhat straight line. So you're going to have to make sure it's sandwiched very frequently. Try to have stay close to the edge with a nice straight line. Okay, so here at the end, because it's at the top of your pocket, you can cut it straight along the edge. You don't have to have any extra. Again, turn it around, make sure that you didn't miss any of the bias tape on the back. And you're done with that first section of bias tape. You can have a pocket that is trimmed just like this. And in fact, this is a very simple trim. If you have a pocket that you didn't have enough fabric and you couldn't make a double pocket, or you just decided not to make a double pocket, then you can finish off the edge of your pocket this way. So that was our extra wide double fold bias tape. Now we're going to use just our single fold bias tape in the same color. And we're going to place it, and it's up to you. This is an artistic decision, okay? I like to place it to where I have about that much of the fabric peeking through, so that it looks like I've gone out and purchased trim that matches my fabric perfectly. But, you know, you could make it a little extra wider. It's up to you. This is your artistic decision. First, make sure you're not going to end up with that line where they've sewn it together. Now, this is an important thing to know as you're sewing. You are sewing on a part of a circle. And this part, if you were to draw the circle here, is going to be bigger than if you were to draw the circle here. So, whenever you're putting bias tape on, it is important that you sew on the inside of the pocket before you sew on the outside edge. So this bias tape has two edges that you're going to sew. This edge that's closer to the middle of the pocket and the edge that's closer to the outside of the pocket. If you sew on the edge that's closest to the outside of the pocket, then you are making the decision for how wide a space you've given yourself of bias tape, how much bias tape you're using. And then you're needing a little extra on this side. So what happens is then it scrunches things up. You will end up having to scrunch up your fabric. So you always have to start on the bigger part, which is going to be the part that's closest to the middle. And as I'm doing this, I'm going to do my best to keep the distance from this trim that I'm adding right now the same as it is from the other trim. Sewing on the edge of that bias tape. Go backwards and forwards. And I'm paying attention to a lot of things here. I'm keeping this the same distance. And I'm sewing on the edge of my bias tape. very important when you're working with bias tape also, it can be somewhat stretchy. Do not pull on your bias tape. Do not stretch it. Keep that bias tape loose. Just lay it gently down and keep sewing. As you go around this curve, you're going to, if you're not careful, you're going to end up bringing that bias tape closer in and you won't have the same space. So you're going to have to sew shorter increments before going around the curve. Go backwards and forwards. Pull it out. And again, give yourself about an inch to tuck under. Trim off your threads. Trim off the threads at the top as well. And now you'll sew on the side of that bias tape that is closer to the outside. And you'll notice this time it's a lot easier because I've already laid it down. I've already measured my distance. All I'm doing is getting it sewn. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And I could start at the bottom, but the truth is, it's harder to see I want to make sure I get them the same. And so I would rather start at the top, even though it means having this extra fabric kind of scrunched up over here. I would rather have that and at least be able to have them the same. Keep eyeballing over there and make sure that I've got it the same. It's easier for me to see that when I'm on a straight line than when I'm on the curve. Now, remembering to go through, make sure, see, here I am talking, and there is that line that I was talking about. So I'm going to cut it off and start there. That's just going to be wasted. Remembering to start sewing it on the inside part of the pocket, not the part that's closer to the outside. Remembering to cut this one longer. And now, since that's already on, I can sew it from the bottom without any problem. Because I've already gauged my distances. Okay, so now I have a pocket with very simple trim. And it is ready to be put onto the body.